En vez de usar herramientas de trabajo rígidas, puedes usar...
Society 13 Podcast Network. Redefining podcasts. Society-13.com. I like to listen.
History tells the story of the world and of our lives. Sometimes that history goes bump in the night. Broadcasting from the center of oddity and the supernatural in Central Florida, it's the History Goes Bump podcast.
Hello, you spectacular people. Welcome to this 168th episode of the History Ghost Bump podcast.
Ghost Tours for the Theater of the Mind.
I am your host, Diane.
And this is Denise.
On this episode, we are bringing you the Sally House. This was suggested to us by listener Mitch Gidry. This place has a heck of a reputation when it comes to the paranormal, and we're looking forward to sharing the history and hauntings of this incredible house with all of you guys. Before we do that, we want to welcome to the spectacular crew, Marco.
Hello, Marco.
Arnolin.
Hey, Arlen.
Rosemond.
Hi, Rosemond.
Bella.
Hello, Bella.
Miranda.
Hi, Miranda.
Ruth.
Hey, Ruth.
And Cindy.
Hi, Cindy.
This place in Kansas there's definitely something going on there. You ready to check it out, Denise?
Absolutely.
All right.
History Goes Bump is entirely listener supported. Become an executive producer for as little as $1 a month. Get listed on the website and invited to exclusive virtual meetups. For $5 a month, you get that and access to exclusive bonus content like Haunted True Crime Bonus Cast. For $10 and above a month, you'll get all that plus awesome History Goes Bump gear. Check out patreon.com/historygoesbump, or you can support us via PayPal. Click the Support the Show tab at historygoesbump.com for more information.
History is full of oddities, curiosities, mysteries, and the truly bizarre. Welcome to this moment in oddity.
In Georgia, there is a mysterious rock wall that is part of Fort Mountain State Park. This wall zigzags for 885 feet and features stones from the area. It is clearly something not made by nature. Many theories have been postulated as to who is responsible for the rock wall. The most obvious one is that Hernando de Soto built a fort here in 1540 as protection from the Creek tribe, and these are the remnants. It is this theory that gives the state park its name, Fort Mountain. But historians have pointed out that De Soto was not even in the area for a month, certainly not long enough to build a fort. Another theory claims that a Welsh prince named Madoc ab Awan Gwynedd fled his homeland after the death of his father, and he came to the area in 1170. He arrived with a group of people, and they built a fortification here. Apparently, they built fortifications in other places too, like DeSoto Falls, Alabama, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. The most interesting theory comes from a Cherokee tradition. They referred to a group who lived here and built the wall as Moon-Eyed People. The reason the tribe used that name was because these people supposedly had very poor eyesight, especially out in the light.
such a classic game, Stranger, um, Kidobia Paranormal, um, the Everybody Man. Um, Make sure you follow me on this account, guys. I'm not gonna be on this account anymore. From here, I'm gonna do videos like this videos, and play music. But yeah, I'm not gonna do anything else. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know, um, you can find me on this account too, though. I don't mind. So, shall we continue this story? Yes.
They were small in stature with very pale skin. They sound very similar to people born with albinism. The Kuna people of Panama quite possibly could have been their ancestors. The Cherokee drove them out and said that a temple had been built near where the stone wall is today. Perhaps these were actually Welsh descendants of the prince and the people who came with him. We will never know, but the wall that is the only symbol of their presence certainly is odd.
Grab your slippers, hot chocolate, flashlight, and maybe even that baseball bat.
This day in history. On this day, December 7th in 1941, Pearl Harbor in Hawaii was bombed by the country of Japan, pulling America into World War II. Just before 8 a.m. that morning, 360 Japanese warplanes appear in the skies over the United States Naval Base at Pearl Harbor. The attack took the base by surprise, and the result was massive casualties and a critical blow to the naval fleet. The attack lasted a mere 90 minutes. Destroyed or heavily damaged were 8 battleships, 3 destroyers, 7 other ships, and 200 aircraft. On the ground, 1,200 people were injured and 2,400 were killed. Nearly half of the fatalities were due to the USS Arizona being hit in its forward magazine by a shell and exploding. It was left on the bottom of the harbor to serve as a memorial for those lost. President Roosevelt appeared the following day before a joint session of Congress and declared, "Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. The United States of America was suddenly and deliberately attacked by naval and air forces of the Empire of Japan." Both houses of Congress immediately voted unanimously, except for one representative from Montana, to go to war with Japan.
You're listening to History Goes Bump.
Atchison, Kansas is famously known as the birthplace of Amelia Earhart. It was home to the Kansas tribe before settlement began when the territory opened in the mid-1850s. The Finney family were some early settlers to the town, and prominent members of the family would live there all their lives. They built several homes, and one of those came to be known as the Sally House. It gained notoriety in the 1990s when a couple named Debra and Tony Pickman lived in the house. Hauntings were documented in the house at that time, and it has become a well-known haunted location to paranormal investigators. The stories that the Pickmans have shared about their former home are horrific and terrifying. Join us as we explore the history and hauntings of Sally House.
Atchison, Kansas was founded at a precarious time in American history in 1854. The Civil War was to commence in the near future, and the country was already strongly divided along the lines of pro-slavery and anti-slavery. This small city would be an example of that great divide. The man for whom the city was named was Senator David Rice Atchison, and he was strongly in favor of slavery. His goal was to set the town up as a place open to slavery. He grabbed a bunch of friendly investors and convinced them to form the town with him. It was decided that the original site was not suitable, and another location that was newly open to settlement and that happened to be rich in agricultural possibilities was chosen. There were 480 acres divided into 100 shares, and each member of the town company received 5 of those shares. 2 of the first businesses built were a hotel and a printing press. Soon, the National Hotel and the Squatter Sovereign, a pro slavery newspaper, were in business.
The city was formally incorporated in 1855. 3 years later, the forces for abolishing slavery took control of the city. When the Civil War broke out, Atchison had 3 militias that fought for the North, but the main concern for the eastern side of the state was protecting against invasion from Missouri. So many of you all are probably familiar with the mascot of the University of Kansas, the Jayhawk. But do you know what the Jayhawk references? The term has been shortened from Jayhawker. Jayhawking was stealing, and this was a tactic of guerrilla fighters in the state of Kansas. One of the famous Jayhawkers during the war was Charles Cleveland Metz, and Atchison was his headquarters with a blessing from the townspeople. He would regularly lead raids into Missouri to steal horses and then bring them back to Kansas to sell. He targeted pro-slavery farmers. He was finally stopped in 1862 when he was shot and killed.
In 1866, Michael C. Finney came to town with his wife Kate, and they bought a parcel of land. Michael had been a wharf master for steamboat traffic on the Missouri River. He started building a home on the property that was completed in 1871. The family supposedly lived in the basement while the house was being completed. Michael did not get to enjoy the home for long because he died on September 27, 1872, at 10 p.m. in the house. At the time, Kate was pregnant, and the couple already had 2 sons, James and Charles, and a daughter, Agnes. 8 months later, Edwin was born, but he would die before he was 2 years old.
Oh, I always hate to hear that. In 1879, the Finney's son James built a house next to his parents' home, and then he left for Colorado to find his riches in Gunnison. He returned shortly thereafter, cursing the God-forsaken place. Atchison was not much better for James, so he deeded his house to his mother and left for St. Louis. Charles was a teenager at the time, and he found work with Dr. Dan Holland, first as a bookkeeper and then as an assistant in the office. Dr. Holland's influence over Charles led him to a decision to attend medical school. At the same time that he was working for the doctor, Charles was also ice skating in competitions, and he was quite good. He and a young lady named Florence Guerrier won a gold medal in couples skating in 1883. No one knows why, but Charles fell out of favor, and by 1885, a local paper announced that the next skating competition was open to all gentlemen except Charlie Finney.
Can you imagine the newspaper singling you out? Here's the next skating competition, but you over there, you are not.
Hey, how are you? Welcome to some broadcast. It's Jeremy.
Invited. I can't even imagine a newspaper. I know it's a small town, but still.
Yeah, it's that small town, I guess, bias, who knows? Charles loved to skate, so he solved the problem by dressing as a woman and skating as Miss Colby from Baltimore. And he was so graceful that nobody knew he was a male.
And now we have Miss Colby from Baltimore. She's a little big in the shoulders, but
Maybe she was from good stock.
yeah, I guess. Charles went to St. Louis and attended Beaumont Hospital Medical College, where he received his MD in 1894. He returned to Atchison and opened a practice in the Martin Building on 5th and Commercial. In 1899, his brother James would have a stroke and spend 8 months in the hospital before passing away. His house was deeded to a woman named Joanna Barnes, who had recently left a mental institution. She was divorced with 3 children and had been admitted to the institution on the orders of a judge because she was violently insane. That's kind of scary when you're had a judge say, you are not only insane, you're violently insane.
And so it leads one to think, how the heck did his home get deeded to her?
I don't know, and it's certainly not the kind of neighbor that I'm sure his mother wanted to have. But by 1906, James's house was back in the family when Joanna deeded it to his sister, Agnes Finney. A year prior, Charles had married Louise Zeibold, and they built a home on the other side of his mother's house. So now all the surviving Finneys are living in a row next to each other. The house that would become known as Sally House was the one built by James and now owned by Agnes.
Look, it's a row of Finneys. Agnes married a man named William True in 1913. Their wedded bliss did not last long as he suffered a stroke 3 years later. Agnes cared for him the best she could, but within 2 years he had passed away. She decided to continue living in the house, and she did until the day she died in the house on November 28, 1939. She turned the home into a boarding house to help with expenses. Charles held on to the house, but when he died in 1947, it was decided to rent the house out. The first family to move in was the Mize family. They did not stay long, and there are no clear records of who lived in the house for the next 10 years. Of course, this makes trying to figure out the origins of hauntings difficult because up until this point, we really didn't have anything that could cause the kind of haunting that has been reported here. There have been a few family member deaths, but nothing like murder or suicide. There was Joanna, who had been declared violently insane, whom had lived in the house.
So I don't know if it's something connected to her, but as we get into talking about the hauntings, we always, of course, like to look at the history to figure out why these hauntings are going on. And I really don't see a reason for us to be having a haunting here, much less something that's not pleasant in at all. The next documented owner was Ethel Anderson. She moved into the house in 1958 and she lived there until 1990. So she was there for quite a while.
Yes, she was.
32 years. Apparently, I mean, if you live in a home for 32 years, doesn't seem like she was having any problems living there. And she didn't make any records or say anything about having any issues. But the next people to move in are going to be Tony and Debra Pickman. And they moved into Sally House on December 31st, 1992. They were a young couple just starting out, and Debra was pregnant with their first child. They both felt that the house was perfect for them because it was the perfect size with 3 bedrooms and a large yard. There was a basement with 1 room and it was unfinished. Beyond the furnace was what appeared to be a crawl space behind a tarp with large dirt mounds. Tony was a native to Atchison and looked forward to bringing up his family in his hometown. The couple had no idea that the quaint home they had just bought was going to become a nightmare.
It's kind of interesting because when we were just describing the crawl space, we actually had in the house that I lived in Colorado, there is a crawl space and it's all dirt under there. So it's not like a finished crawl space. And so I could see it being kind of mounded too because we'd go in there sometimes.
Our friends across the street, I remember it was the one thing that creeped me out over in their basement. They had one of those little, it was like a pocket door almost, but it was really big. And you would open that up and you'd look in there and it was just dirt. And
Yeah.
I thought that was the weirdest thing because we did not have that in our basement.
Yeah, no, in our basement in Colorado, we had the exact same thing.
Yeah, I don't know if our house was just not built with a crawl space or because we'd finished off the basement. So I don't know if it had been there before, but I don't think it had. So it was just weird that we didn't have that. But I've heard people say that. That to me is the creepiest thing.
Well, and it is weird because the woman who lived there for the 32 years, you wonder if Ethel was into some stuff because isn't it funny that she seemed to have no issues, but yet the next family that lived there was going to be pretty much terrorized.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, a woman with the name Ethel, you just don't see her like dancing around the fire and conjuring Satan or anything. So I don't know.
Except for it's always those kind of, no offense to any librarians, but it's always those librarian types that have this like secret life somewhere.
Great. We're starting rumors about Ethel.
Oh, well, it's what we do. At first, Debra said that they didn't notice anything unusual because there were boxes everywhere. But after they were unpacked, strange things started happening. Their dog was good natured, but anytime he was near the nursery, he would bark ferociously. The cat started getting into the act as well, and they sat and watched something unseen flying around the ceiling of the house. Their eyes would dart back and forth as though following something unseen. Then the timers for the stove and microwave would go off at odd times. They had not been set by either Tony or Debra. The lights in the family room would dim themselves at night. This was a concern for the Pickmans because the switch was across the room, so it could not be either of them messing with the lights. Also, the light switch was not of the dimmer variety.
So it does make it a little strange that the lights are dimming themselves when you don't have the possibility of that happening.
I would say so. So they just assumed they had bad wiring. It was an old house after all. But an electrician could find no problems with the wiring, and this was backed up by the fact that equipment like the stereo and television were on the same circuit and they were having no issues with either of them.
So you're thinking if the lights are dimming, you'd get the sound dimming on the stereo a little bit, going soft, then loud. That wasn't happening. The TV wasn't turning itself off or anything because of a bad wiring job or something.
Or like the static from having a short or something.
Next, they started feeling cold spots in the house. These were usually near the stairs. Electronic musical toys would turn themselves on, and sometimes they made noises that were not supposed to come out of the toys, kind of like maybe some whispers, voices. And some of those voices sounded like distant voices that were trying to communicate.
That would completely freak me out.
Yeah, I can only imagine if you have a little toy that talks and it sounds like it's not coming from right there, but it's in the distance or muffled or mumbling as if it's trying to come through, but not having any luck. The phone had issues with disturbances, and several times Deborah claimed that she would just end the call because the phone would disconnect so many times during a conversation. None of these issues are cause for too much concern. They're more annoying than anything, obviously. And then they brought their newborn home, and things are going to change just a little bit.
As new parents, the Pickmans thought that it was normal that their baby woke them up constantly. Sometimes it would happen right after a changing or feeding when they thought he was asleep. Deborah was outside talking to their neighbor named Carol one day, and Carol asked, as an aside, if there was a reason they had left the light on in the nursery all night long. Deborah had told her that they didn't leave the light on in the nursery, and Carol said that her husband could see it at all hours of the night. Deborah suggested that perhaps they were just seeing the light in the hallway, but Carol was emphatic that the light was on in the nursery. This made Tony and Deborah wonder if something had actually been waking up their baby in the night.
Now you got these two young people. This is their first baby, and it's waking them up all the time. So they're not getting any sleep at all, which is not good for your marriage, especially when you're young, and it's just not good for you health-wise either. So Deborah's sister Karen said that she'd come and help them out for a little bit. So what she would do is at night, she would take care of the feedings and the changing so that they could sleep through the night and get the rest that they needed. She'd been there for about a week when an unforgettable, terrifying event occurred. It was July in 1993. The group had been at Tony's parents' house for the day visiting. They got home that night and Tony went upstairs to use the bathroom. He comes down and he looks at his wife, Debra, and he says, I was looking in the nursery and I'm just wondering why you did that with the stuffed animals. And Debra looks at him and she's like, "What are you talking about? I didn't do anything with any stuffed animals in there other than, they're put them up on the shelf